Thank you all for coming today. The weather has improved, so I can't say thank you for coming in the bad weather, but thrilled to see you all, and I hope you are grateful that you came, as grateful as we are. Thank you, Mary Lynn, for busting me. I am part of the sweatshop. I have a sweatshop on Amazon that I just opened. So anyway, this is my first book. I'm kind of proud of it. It's available ebook or paperback. And what I'm going to talk about today is a portion of what's contained in here, but there's much, much more in this book about next year. It's very, very comprehensive, and it all comes from an evolutionary astrology perspective, which maybe some of you may or may not be familiar with, but it's a great read. It's got some really vital information in it. It's got some explanations you'll see today. We'll walk through it. I'm gonna give you the good and the bad and the in between. So we've had some really great information from Mary Lynn and Michael, and they've laid out these cycles of time. Because what we are talking about are cycles, long cycles of time. Let me ask a question. Who really feels comfortable right now? Who feels safe? Who feels that things are like going in the right direction? We have one person. That's good. All right, that's good. We need to have one person who's totally individuated here. It would be weird if it wasn't the case. But clearly, we have seen that these cycles have repeated in 20-year cycles, 30-year cycles, 100, 200-year cycles. But what is different about this one? Okay? I'm going to take you under the hood a little bit, and we're going to find out really what's going on with some aspects, some dynamics that really aren't getting talked about a lot. They don't get paid attention to because it's not the big guys, it's not the major players. But this is a room full of people who aren't major players. None of us are really major players, right? And yet we all have some importance in the world, and that's kind of the things I want to talk about. So we're going to look at Pluto and Saturn, and has anybody heard of dwarf planet Eris? Anybody familiar with Eris? Yes? Well, by the time we're done today, you'll know more about Eris than maybe you want to know. And we're going to look at some things that haven't happened in quite a long period of time. So the most familiar story of Eris is her culpability of having started the Trojan War. The story goes that Zeus planned a celebration for the future parents of Achilles, Thetis and Peleus. And interestingly enough, Chiron was the one who sent out the invitations, the wounder. And he snubbed Eris. He deliberately did not invite her to this event, is one of the stories that has been told. She showed up anyway, and she threw into the wedding party a golden apple, which said, "To the fairest." Well, there were some pretty amazing goddesses who were at this event, and three of them immediately, all of a sudden took up the contest. Hera, Pallas Athena, and Aphrodite. Well, Zeus chose Paris, who was the son of Priam, the king of Troy, to be the judge, because previously he had judged some other event and he'd done a great job. Zeus was very impressed, so he brought him back for a second event, and he was the judge. And so Hera offered to give him kingdoms of Europe and Asia. And Pallas Athena, I think I'm hitting my thing here, Pallas Athena promised him skill in war and great wisdom. But Aphrodite promised him beauty. He promised him the most beautiful woman in the world, who was Helen, who was one of the daughters of Zeus and the wife of Menelaus, the king of Sparta. So obviously that's who he chose. He chose Aphrodite. And he received Helen. Now, it's interesting because he abducted, or supposedly abducted, Helen, and they went back off to Troy. But, if we look at this version, there's some things about it that maybe don't really mesh, because there's part of the mythology that says that not only did she not go kicking and screaming, she went willingly, but that she never showed any remorse whatsoever for what she had caused. So, in some ways, it wasn't Eris that started the Trojan War. It was Helen. It was the anathema of human nature. It was beauty. Beauty killed the beast. Okay? She was the face that burnt the towers of Ilium. And the Trojan War raged for 10 years. And at the end of that, Hermes led all of the heroes of the Greek culture, Greek history, down into the underworld. It was the end of the Greek Golden Age. So we see, in this first story, a lot of implications, perhaps, of some of these cycles that have been described, and perhaps some of the things that we are passing through. This time we have another golden apple. It's not a thing; it's a person. Okay. We have something that has been thrown into our midst, which is instigating, which is disrupting, which is causing strife and discord and polarity, and which has literally brought our country to its knees in many ways. Question is why? So let's look a little bit at the astronomy of what's going on here, or excuse me, the astrology of what's going on here. So we know that on January 16th, January 16th, the early January, we're going to have the major conjunction of Saturn and Pluto. But we're also going to have what's known as a last quarter square, and I'll have some charts I'll show you in a few minutes what that means. We're going to have a square aspect between both Saturn and Pluto to Eris. And it's exact at from 23 degrees of Capricorn to 23 degrees of Aries. Now, why this is significant is that this particular aspect, surely there have been many squares over the past 2,700 years or 500 years between Pluto, Uranus, and Eris, but not from Capricorn to Aries. And in a minute, I'm going to explain to you why. The orbit of Eris is 500 years. And out of that 500 years, you can see this graph that I put together. Out of that 500 years, she spends 120 years in the sign of Aries. That's a long time. So let me just get some water. So this transit of Eris, Aries, is highly potentializing. Why? It generates challenging events because of the exceptionally long time it spends transiting through this time. And there's a specific reason why it intensifies it. Because Eris turns retrograde every year, once a year. Does everybody know what a retrograde cycle is? Where the planet appears to be symbolically moving backwards from our geocentric perspective. Well, every year, Eris turns retrograde, like all the other outer planets. However, because her transit through Aries is so long, that in that 129 years, she hits every single degree of Aries by retrograde. Now, if any of you have ever had Mercury go retrograde on any planet in your chart, you know what that feels like. A retrograde drills down, it burns in, it intensifies the dynamic because the planet is literally standing still. It's like taking a magnifying glass, holding it up to the sun, and capturing the sun to the magnet. That's what it does to that point in the chart. Well, 129 years, 60 degrees, guess what? It hits them twice. It literally camps out on every degree. So that's why we get this intense effect. But that's not all. Because of the length of it and because of the orbits of the outer planets, Uranus and Saturn, there are multiple conjunctions between Uranus and Saturn to Eris in Aries as well. Okay? She's very comfortable in her brother's home, clearly. This all really began in 2015 between 2015 and 2017 when Uranus and Eris were conjunct in the sign of Aries. Okay, for 2 years, they're still only 9 degrees apart. Who remembers what happened in 2016? Anybody? Right. Okay. So here we have this square coming up, and this energy is being transferred or being added to now by Saturn and Pluto. Okay, it's been carrying all this tremendous energy in Eris. Saturn has conjoined Eris 3 times in the last 100 years, and we're going to look at that in a minute. It hasn't happened for 500 years. We're going to come back to the Middle Ages again. Marilyn has referenced the Middle Ages. We're looking at a couple of time periods here that are probably 2 of the most critical times in Earth history, just for the record. So this is a biwheel. The outer wheel are the actual transits, the Saturn square Eris transit. The inner wheel is the chart of the United States, the birth chart. Now, this gets a little controversial here because I don't use January. I don't think that the country was born on July 4th, 1776. Because on July 6th, 1775, 1 year earlier, Continental Congress declared war on Great Britain, passed an act to raise a standing army to bear arms, and they hired George Washington as the commander of that army. Well, if you're a colony and you declare war against your mother country, I think you have severed all political and economic ties in that event, and by default become a sovereign nation. I've been working with this chart all year and working with all these transits that we're having, and it's mind-blowing, it's remarkable, and I'm going to just show you a couple of these. You see all these hard, solid lines in this chart. These are aspects between these outer planets. Actually, two planets in the chart. They're all within, the widest one is 2 degrees apart, and I'm going to show you what's going on. Okay, so, do I have to hold it, Michael? Okay, so for starters, Uranus, we know about Uranus. Uranus comes along and just disrupts and interrupts everything it touches. It shatters all the Saturnian, Aquarian energy that existed before it. It's a transformational individuator. Well, Saturn, in a mundane chart, in the chart of a country, it represents its leader, okay? It also happens to be in the first house, which represents the body politic. So an inconjunct is a 150-degree aspect. It's a very challenging, it's a crisis. It's a course change. Western astrology likes to say that these inconjuncts are minor aspects. An inconjunct is not a minor aspect. It's extremely powerful, okay? So this is the first thing going on. Here's Pluto down here. Transit 22 degrees, you see it? 22 degrees of Capricorn. Here's the moon, the U.S. moon, at 20 degrees of Libra. That's a square, okay? They're 2 degrees apart. Again, the moon represents the people. That is you. That's me. That's who we are. That's again, that's the people of our country. I don't want to take too much time here because you'll see this chart, but it's a total validation of why we are in a total emotional chaos, and what is happening in Washington, because the presidency, the White House, the presidency of the United States, not the person, but the office, is under tremendous pressure. And from my perspective, it has been under a shadow since 1963. Okay, the presidency of the United States has been under a shadow for decades. Okay, I'm not going to go into my elevator speech about Reagan and Nixon. You know, where did they come from? Hello, and now we have Trump. Okay, we had Bush. It's another whole talk, which I will be happy to do at another time. But the point is this didn't just happen in 2016, okay? For most of the 15th and part of the 16th century, Saturn squared Eris in Capricorn at an incredible 13 times. You know, it's an interesting thing about the outer planets and the number of times that they retrograde and pass over a point. Pluto's a good example, or the Uranus-Pluto conjunction, square that we had, 7 squares of Uranus and Pluto. Why was it 7 squares? Because if we had just one, we wouldn't have survived it. It needed 7 incremental changes for us to accomplish it, okay? So we're going to have just the single Saturn, but we're going to have, well, I'm skipping ahead, I'm getting ahead of myself. So we're going to just have this one singularity that's going to occur in January. But considering that it's coming along behind all these other conjunctions that Mary Lynn and Michael have already told us about, it's not a singularity at all. It's just part of a larger unfoldment. What happened during those years? This is the Middle Ages, guys. We had the fall of Constantinople. Now, what does that mean? Rome was the center of the known world for centuries. It shifted to Constantinople with the fall of the Holy Roman Empire. But the spread of the Ottoman Empire at this time took Constantinople away from the West, and it's been there ever since. Okay? It was huge. It was a total shift of power. Gutenberg invented the printing press, which seeded the Renaissance. Okay? Christopher Columbus, the conquistadors, yes, they discovered the New World. We would probably all be living in England, if they hadn't come here, who knows? Or maybe we would have, I don't know, it's all speculation. But it also was the genocide of the native peoples of North and South America by warfare and disease at the same time. The Inca Empire was founded, was the beginning of the slave trade, the tripart slave trade from Africa to the US to England. And Joan of Arc, Martin Luther, Leonardo da Vinci, Michelangelo, and Guru Nanak Dev, you may not be familiar with him. He was a saint who was sacred to most of the Eastern practices, all lived during that time. So Eris came back to Eris again in 1927. All right, what did we have? First, we had the stock market crash of 1929. Then we had the Great Depression, rise of fascism, and ultimately World War II. Came around again 1959. We had the Cuban Revolution. Now, maybe that wasn't such a big deal. It was. Communism showed up in our hemisphere. It was frightening. We had intercontinental ballistic missiles 15 minutes away from Washington, D.C. Okay? The day the music died, if any of you, most of you, I look at this audience, you all remember that, okay? The Big Bopper. I mean, this was huge. This was one of the great, huge catastrophes of our teenage years. There's no question. I mean, rock and roll, the day rock and roll died. The Dalai Lama had to leave India, okay? Alaska and Hawaii statehood was founded. 100 years, we had 2 new states. The in cold blood murder occurred in Kansas. The book that publicized it was awful. It was a horrible, horrible event. Transistors were invented. Without transistors, we wouldn't have this computer. We probably wouldn't have any of these we wouldn't have any of the technology that we take for total granted without the transistor. Sputnik was the beginning of the space race. DNA, beginning of mapping the human genome. CERN, which is the home of the largest particle accelerator in the world, which has discovered all the string theory and all the photons and all the new, it totally revolutionized physics, and NASA, okay, National Space Administration. In 1990, we had the breakup of the Soviet Union. Who would ever have thought that the Soviet Union would crumble? I mean, they were just too big to fail, and they went right down. Led to the reunification of Germany. Can everybody hear me if I back up? Are you still up? You still good? Yeah. And history doesn't repeat; it rhymes. So we had DNA being discovered in '59, and then the Human Genome Project, which is going on right here in Santa Fe, when they actually mapped the human gene. The Hubble Space Telescope, which has given us all these unbelievable, images of our world. That is our world up there. Those aren't, rocks in space. That's us. As astrologers, we feel that. We embody that. That's not something that's second to us. And the World Wide Web. I don't think I need to explain to anybody the importance of what the World Wide Web has done for our world. So on January 26th, in a couple of weeks, an even rarer event is going to occur, something that hasn't happened in 2,700 years. Pluto will perfect to the first of 3 last quarter squares to Eris. A last quarter square is a closing square. Just go back to, if you can see in this chart that Pluto is in Capricorn and Eris is in Aries. Well, Capricorn is behind Aries in the natural progression of the zodiac. So Pluto is literally catching up with Eris. That's called a last quarter square. There's 2 squares. There's a square where Pluto might have been out in front of Eris, but this is the square where Pluto and Saturn are coming around behind. It's closing a cycle, okay? And it's Pluto to Eris because Pluto has a 248-year orbit, and Eris is double that. It's 500 years. So Pluto is the slower planet here. So there's only a single instance of this occurring. I went back 4,000 years in solar fire, which is the industry standard software that astrologers use. 4,000 years, I found one incident of Pluto in Capricorn square Eris in Aries. It's phenomenally rare, okay? This was 7th century BC. Has anybody read Cosmos and Psyche? Yeah, then you know. Rick Tarnas brought the axial stage really into our consciousness, into the dialogue. Buddha was in India, Zoroaster in Persia, Pythagoras in Greece, Hesiod writes Theogony, the sacred Hindu texts, the Upanishads were written, a Mesopotamian power transferred from Assyria to Babylon with the fall of Nineveh. I mean, this was probably the critical point spiritually in the development of Western civilization, of these people on the planet. So this is the moment that Pluto will square Eris, and it's an interesting chart because from an astrological perspective, I guess I should point this out. Susan told me that I have to tell everybody that this is the Eris glyph, and I forgot to do it. Thank you, Susan. This is Eris, okay? And it's interesting because she looks like Mars. She's Mars' brother, mythologically. The 2 of them are family. They're siblings of each other, which is where she gets her bloodlust from. But it's not necessarily all bloodlust. But point is, you can see that she's still, pretty close. Uranus, is 84 years. He's creeping away, but they're still within orb. They're at a sign, but I use 10-degree orbs. And so they're still kind of together. But the point being is she's relatively orphaned. She's not making a lot of aspects to other planets, but the ones that she are making are quite significant because we see the square to Jupiter and Pluto, which I've talked about, but there's this really interesting quintile to the North Node. Anybody know what a quintile is? You've heard of quintiles? It's a highly individuated creativity. It's where we bring something really unique to our own creativity. And the North Node is our potential trajectory forward. It's a potential reality, a probable reality. And the reason I say a probable reality is because we are beings of consciousness. The choices that we make in this moment are going to determine what happens tomorrow. We don't know. I am one of those astrologers who firmly believes that astrology is not best served as a predictive science because everything changes in the blink of an eye. But potentially, that North Node is it's facilitated. There is something there that will. What's the word I'm looking for here? Will actually feed anything that comes towards it. We have to approach it proactively. It's seeded for us. It's highly potentialized, but unless we really work with it, we probably won't see it happening very consciously anyway. It's happening. It's working, but it's not necessarily a conscious evolution. But at any point, the quintile there tells me that Uranus is doing more than just trying to blow us up. okay? It's about awareness. It's about a transformation. Pluto is the caterpillar becoming the butterfly, okay? You know, my favorite Pluto transformation, thing is, the caterpillar looked up at the butterfly and he said, "You're not going to get me up in one of those things." So, this is what we're looking at here, okay? We are being tasked with issues, and, it's the South Node. Nobody's really mentioned that yet. All these conjunctions are on the South Node. The South Node is what is the refuse. We ingest through the north, through the North Node, and we excrete, if you would, politely, to the South Node. Well, we're dealing with literally 6,000 years of excretion, okay? This is what's coming out, but it's a good thing because symptoms are an attempt to heal, right? So, and again, here's the U.S. chart. And I just want to say something. It didn't surprise me that I found a U.S. chart, and I didn't discover this. This is from a woman. I'm going to credit Ariel Gutman for selling some of her books and telling me I should buy this book. It was called The True Chart of the United States. I can't remember I'm losing the author's name at the moment. But she's a British writer. She did the whole book in sidereal, not tropical astrology, so I had to go back and kind of rework a lot of it. But every chart that I have looked at, it just glows with truth that this works. And it doesn't surprise me because, like everything else, what we've been told about American history is a lie. So, did I skip a slide here? Okay, so the other thing that's happening here, if you can look at this chart down here, this is Pallas Athena, okay? And Pallas Athena, again, is an asteroid. She's not a planet. She was the daughter of Zeus, born parthenogenically from his crown chakra. She represents wisdom. But she was also a warrior. She was born fully clad in her armor, out of the top of his head, in her golden armor, holding her spear in the air, shouting a battle cry, okay? Virgin, never married, repulsed all romantic advances. She was her father's little girl. But she also represents a woman in a man's world, okay? Because she would stand alongside Mars. She would never refuse the call to battle, but she would always try to negotiate peace first. She was an activist, okay? So, astrologically, she's called an octave transformer. And what that means is we have a higher mind and a lower mind. Uranus corresponds to our higher mind. Mercury is our lower mind. These are our cognitive functions. Uranus is what comes to us seemingly of its own volition. She is the transformation between the two. She is able to take that higher octave and step it down so that Mercury can actually work with it. And this is huge. We have discovered all these outer planets, but we can't receive them directly, okay? It would be like some kind of pharmaceutical drug that would kill us instantly, though if we took it in small doses, it would heal us, okay? Maybe there's something homeopathic about it, I don't know. But the point is that we need the circulation of the inner planets, our Mercury, our Venus, our Mars, our personal stuff, to touch, to work with these outer, to pick up the information from them. And so we get messages from Pallas Athena. In the Odyssey, she was the one who got Odysseus home. Okay, he was lost. He got sucked into every desire, everything that happened along the way by his subjective ego. He just couldn't resist his ego. She was the one who kept him on track and got him home safely to Penelope. Okay, so she informs us. So the point being is that she has her surrogates here on the planet. okay? We're not alone, and we're not unsupported. Many of you probably also have Pallas prominently in your chart. I have Pallas right on my midheaven. That's why I'm standing here talking to you about her. Men have her, Bernie Sanders, Tom Hartman. It's not just women who have Pallas Athena and are speaking out. But these are the best examples. And this is our hope. This is where the progressive movement, this is where the next thing, the Aquarian energy that Mary Lynn and Michael have told us that is out there. Pluto's going to go into Aquarius, in about 4 or 5 years. We're going to see a tremendous shift, okay? It's getting to the end of Capricorn. So this Aquarian energy is coming in, but the point being is that we're already seeing it. It doesn't happen in a moment. It happens in cycles over time. So where is all this going? In the past, the long-term consequences of both of these squares have generated global dramatic changes, leaps in new technology for their age, and new awareness and consciousness with each visitation. As a species that learns through emotional experience, and we do, we don't know something until we have experienced it directly through our emotional body, this correlates to the archetype of Virgo. The Virgo process prepares us to be in society, to be equal with other people in Libra, to be able to live as equals and balanced and get along with everybody and not get vertical with somebody and be on the same level with everybody else in the world. As a species, I said that already, I'm sorry. This is what all the mystic, religious teachers, wise men, shamans, visionaries have told us through the ages. All of the saints who have walked on the planet all spoke the same message. The only difference was the time in which they came and the consciousness to which it was addressed. But it was the same message. And we're hearing it again. These messages are in the field. And it's incumbent upon each one of us to hear that still small voice within us, to rise to it, because nobody's coming to save us. Nobody's coming to save us. From primordial night, Eris arises, birthing flames of discord as she demonizes. No mercy ignited as she spreads her wrath. Only nightmares weep out in the wake of her path. Time contracts, the future shimmers. Tentatively, seductively, it seems there are no winners. Gaia throbs, she clangs, she cries, as she melts and floods, scorched and writhing under toxic skies. Is this the end or just the beginning? Is there a chance that we are really winning? These times are frantic, there is no doubt. It seems we have a lot to worry about. Let's hold the center and play our parts. The difference is all in our hearts. Be brave, be kind, let love be the rule, and we wish each other Happy Yule.